What is one fact you know that will make other people respond with, "Why the F do you know that?" Story 1. Men have a scar from their taint all the way to the head of the penis that is caused due to the closing of the vagina during development in the uterus. Can confirm, I always wondered what the f that was. Story 2. Strippers have to pay to work at their clubs. Usually, they have to also pay the house mom and DJ. Every private room they book, 20%, 30% goes to the house. A lot of dancers will also wear watches while working to make sure they're not spending too much time with one person if they're not getting paid properly, since they can't carry their phones around. Story 3. Japanese brothels often operate as restaurants, so you basically pay around $100 for some crackers and green tea. Everything else is just voluntary service. $100 gets you a girl to sit next to you for 30 minutes. Story 4. When you're in an enclosed, airtight space, you don't die because of lack of oxygen, but rather because of carbon dioxide poisoning. It induces anxiety, panic, reduces your ability to make rational decisions. Think Apollo 13. It's a pretty shitty way to go. Forgot to add that you're the one producing the poison killing you? Story 5. Flatworms are dual-gendered and mate by fencing with their penises. The winner is the one that penetrates the other's skin first. Some species have two penises. Story 6. It takes about 5-6 hours in a boiling lye bath to fully dissolve a body. Less if the pot you're using has a pressure cooker attachment. All you'll be left with is bone shadows, little undissolved bits of calcium that can be crushed, and a pinkish-gray slurry that can be neutralized with vinegar so it can be safely dumped. I learned about this from disposing of deer carcasses. After harvesting the usable meat, we take the offal and bones, pop the joints and chuck them in the pot. Let it go outside for a few hours, then discreetly dispose of the slurry. Just make sure you don't use an aluminum pot, since lye will react with aluminum, creating aluminum oxide and hydrogen gas. Very flammable, often leading to an explosion from the heat source. Also toxic. Story 7. A bee's testicles explode when they mate. I will add that the explosion is loud enough it can be heard. Their dick is also blown off by the explosion, and occasionally gets stuck in the queen. Story 8. Wombats naturally crap out cube-shaped poop. Scientists think it's so they can stack it to mark their territory without it rolling away. Story 9. More just nifty animal facts. Squids have a donut-shaped brain with their esophagus running through the middle. If they swallow too big of a bite, they can give themselves brain damage. I have an honorable mention. It was one of those facts I heard as a kid, and for some reason I just want it to be true. Dog saliva has a boiling point much higher than human saliva. Story 10. A corpse can have an erection. It is called angel lust or death erection. Story 11. You know how fireflies use their lights to indicate they want to mate with each other? Well, the females sometimes bait the males into coming over using the mating pattern just so they can eat them. Story 12. Rock hyraxes are not rodents but are closely related to elephants. They appear very similar to marmots, a rodent, due to convergent evolution by filling a similar ecological niche. I rattled this off at work one day and someone really asked me exactly the title of this post. Wikipedia is the answer. Story 13. Broccoli and cauliflower are man-made. It was carefully bred by Italian farmers more than 2,000 years ago, carefully breeding different types of wild cabbage to create it. Brassica, that wild cabbage, was bred into. Broccoli, cauliflower, kale, bok choy Brussels, sprouts, kohlrabi collard, greens, mustard, rapeseed turnips, rutabaga. Story 14. Sometimes, when horses are bored, they slap their to their underside to masturbate. I witnessed a Clydesdale do this at Grant's farm. Absolutely scary. Story 15. Men who die by hanging sometimes come in the process. Story 16. Many species of sea cucumbers have evolved to have teeth in their anus to ward off potential inhabitants. They also will expel their organs through their anus to scare off predators. They then regenerate the organs pretty quickly. They also don't have much flavor, other than slightly salty, and their texture is kind of crunchy Vaseline. Story 17. Australian box jellyfish have 64 anuses. Story 18. Before kale became a popular health food, the largest consumer of kale was Pizza Hut. They bought it to ring the salad bar. Story 19. About 1 girl out of 100.000 will have the vaginal and anal tracts fused together, meaning that they can in fact get pregnant doing anal. Story 20. Most cruise ships are equipped with a morgue to account for any passengers who died during the voyage. I read somewhere that many old people are actually starting to use cruise ships as assisted living facilities when they can no longer get by on their own. The tickets for a month of cruises are about the same as a month's stay in a facility. There is plenty to do on board to keep them active. Cooking and cleaning is taken care of, and the weather is usually beautiful. Story 21. Those tiny fake flowers in little glass vases at the gas station are less about the flowers and more about the glass, which can be used as a crack pipe. There's a small head shop, convenience store / Chinese restaurant, printing shop, ice cream joint down the street from me, and they straight up just have the tubes at the front counter. They know. Story 22. Gray whale couples need a third whale to act as a brace while they mate so they don't float apart midway through Story 23. Cats like the taste of earwax. Story 24. It takes 2-3 days to cremate a body on a standard bonfire. A lot of people are typically asking how I know this, so I figured I'd explain. I studied for a rather specific master's degree around psychological trauma. It was particularly pertinent to the Army, so within our small class were a few officers from the Army being sent to touch up their learning. One of them was an Army doctor who had been with them for more than 30 years. Can't remember exactly how the conversation got to this point, but he made some quip about having to burn a body, and it taking 2 or 3 days to burn on a bonfire. We asked him why he was burning a body, and his only response was, "We weren't allowed to bury it." We never could convince him to elaborate further. It turned out that one of his deployments was to Rwanda, as part of Operation Gabriel immediately after the genocide. If I had to guess, it might have been something to do with that. When dealing with more than 1 million dead bodies, many were likely never identified or claimed by next of kin, and perhaps for some reason this one couldn't be buried with the others. Again, this is purely speculation, so take it with a pinch of salt. Story 25. Human has a distinct smell that's different from other commonly encountered poops. Story 26. The most babies born to one woman is 69 in the 1700s. Story 27. Since frogs have long tongues, they can't use it to push food down their throat like humans do. So when they have food in their mouths, they close their eyes and push the food down their throats with their eyeballs. Story 28. In 2006, Coca-Cola employees tried to sell secrets to Pepsi. Pepsi told Coca-Cola about it. Story 29. It takes more than 6 standard concrete blocks to hold a human body underwater after death. Story 30. Vibrators were the 5th domestic electrical device invented. Story 31. Most birds don't have intermittent reproductive organs, like a penis or vagina, and they share their genes through a hole called a cloaca that leads to their inner organs. The act is called a cloacal kiss and is over super fast. Most duck species, however, do have intermittent organs. The penis is shaped like a corkscrew and can be 50% or more of the length of the duck in some species. This is because the vagina is an elaborate maze of twists and turns, creating an evolutionary arms race between the sexes. The longest duck award goes to the Argentine lake duck. Though he is a mere 15 inches long, his dangling corkscrew is up to 16 inches erect. Now that's got to produce some drag. People generally seem to struggle with why females resist mating. Much like humans, female ducks like to choose the best male to reproduce with. They will make themselves available to the males they prefer, and this mechanism allows them to resist advances from the males they don't deem worthy. Story 32. The longest recorded piece of poop, 26 feet long. A typical ejaculation consists of 1 calorie. Also, a correction: if you swallow the semen, it will give you 1 calorie. You do not burn 1 calorie. Story 33. Male echidnas have a 4-headed penis. Story 34. Why is goose geese but moose is not meese? Well, I'm glad you asked. Goose has Germanic origins and thus follows the Germanic pluralization in the same manner as foot to feet, tooth to teeth, etc. However, the word moose was incorporated into the English language some 200 years later and has Native American origins. Yay! Story 35. The human body can literally expel feces out of your mouth instead of your ass. I used to know a nurse who had to deal with that once. The guy was constipated so badly that he was shitting out of his mouth, I guess. Anyway, she said it's the worst thing she's ever smelled. Way worse than just straight poop, apparently. Story 36. Siblings, or parents and children, that were separated from one another at birth or a very young age are often extremely sexually attracted to one another if they meet later in life. The phenomenon is called genetic attraction. I think it was weird to know this until I shared it with my boyfriend, and he was totally weirded out. Thanks, SVU. Story 37. Mammals, from house cats to elephants, take about the same time to urinate. Story 38. Ireland's rail gauge is slightly wider than the international standard, yet its tram system uses the international standard. Story 39. The largest walnut grove in the world is located outside the small village of Arslanbab in mountainous southern Kyrgyzstan. Local oral legend has it the grove was planted by a migrant wise man nicknamed Arslan the Wanderer. DNA analysis of the trees has confirmed they are not native to the region, and the local population came to the area from a related batch of seeds about 1,000 years ago. Story 40. After Alois Alzheimer gave the first ever speech describing the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, no one in the audience asked him any questions or made any follow-up comments, because they were all much more excited to hear the next guy on the list give a speech about compulsive Story 41. Rubbing alcohol is a great way to get the smell of smeared poop out of skin. Story 42. When the Pilgrims first landed in America, they found these weird dirt mounds in a field. So they dug them up and discovered they were Native American graves. Oops! They returned everything, but then came back later to take the cooking pots and utensils that had been buried with the corpses. They apparently packed really light on the way over and didn't bring basic household essentials, which would be really useful in, starting a fucking colony. Story 43. The slitting of the front of the throat is much more improbable than most people realize, given a bone is actually blocking the spot that most see in movies, TV shows. If, in fact, a movie wanted to be more realistic, they would instead have the sides of the throat slit because of the main artery that sits in that spot. Story 44. Don't buy rabbit already skinned and gutted. Could well be a cat. They look really similar. If it's already skinned, you need to see the kidneys to tell they're installed in a different config. Second, don't make risky meat purchases from a Sunday market trailer in a shady part of town. Story 45. The Nazis bled Soviet children dry to provide blood transfusions for injured troops. Story 46. Open the guts of a body before disposing in water so they won't inflate and are able to sink all the way to the bottom, like stabbing a baked potato with a fork before cooking. Story 47. Padlocks in Europe often have tighter keyways than American ones and require thinner pieces of metal to pick. Story 48. Butterflies taste with their hind feet. Story 49. Anybody who has ever had to write a paper knows what a 12-point font is. This point system relates to measurements for fonts, type, and certain design elements. 12 points go into 1 pica, and 6 pica go into 1 inch. While sizes vary from font to font, even within the relative standardization of font sizes, if you need a font that is about 1 inch tall, you want a 72-point font because 6 pica times 12 points is 72. For 2-inch font, 144. For 3-inch font, 216, and so on. Story 50. Male moths can vibrate their tentacles at will to throw off bats. Story 51. A human head is still alive for about 10 seconds after decapitation. Story 52. MLB umpires are required to wear black underwear in case their pants split during a game. My flight attendant uniform policy says something similar. Underwear had to be black, navy blue. There's no way to really enforce it unless you have it sticking out of your uniform. Story 53. If you are stranded on a desert island with only the bodies of other people as a source of food, you will want to only eat the legs, arms, and butt, as they are the most easily prepared parts of the human body. All other parts are either too close to vital, bacteria-infested organs, or are just unsafe to eat in general. For example, the brain. The legs, arms, and butt can be easily cooked over a small fire to make it safe to eat, even though the actual caloric intake of human flesh is nutritionally less viable than most other animals. Story 54. Instead of a penis, male sharks have 2 claspers. They're made of the same cartilage as their skeleton and also attached to their pelvis. Story 55. The reason why Egyptian mummies are so rare nowadays is because the Europeans ate them. They believed that eating a mummy would have medicinal benefits, and the spirit of the person they consumed would watch over and protect them. Story 56. In Pennsylvania, it is illegal to sleep on top of a refrigerator at night. Story 57. If you want to skin a human alive, you have to do it in a warm room, otherwise he will die of the cold because his skin doesn't isolate him anymore. Story 58. The world's youngest mom was 5. She was impregnated at 4. Story 59. Jeffrey Dahmer tried to make sex zombies out of some of his victims by drilling holes in their heads while they were still alive and pouring acid into the holes. Story 60. Male giraffes will headbutt a female in the bladder until she urinates. Then it tastes the pee to help it determine whether or not the female is ovulating. Story 61. If you get starved and tortured, you can lose 30 pounds in a single week. Source: was starved and tortured for a week. Seer: lost 30 pounds. Seer stands for survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. Level C Seer is for personnel deemed to be at high risk of capture. So basically, pilots and special ops folks generally. The prison guards at the SF training camp, some of them were actual POWs in Vietnam. So getting tortured wasn't about any sort of sadism. It was about learning how to group together to survive and return home with your honor intact. People probably aren't answering much about it because much of the training there is classified, but one thing I will share for sure that will be safe. You insulate, you don't isolate. If someone appears to have turned traitor against your fellow prisoners to get an extra blanket or something, the initial reaction is to say, guy. You want to isolate this person out of the group, but you should pull that person in tighter. Show care and forgiveness and remind them of their true friends and enemies. Insulate them with love, as it were. Otherwise, your group will slowly turn on each other and those divisions will be exploited to gain even more control over you. So hopefully that metaphor resonates with some of you.